big part of this work came out of what is equity? And we utilized the definition from Achieving the Dream. And I'll read it just as it is because I want all of us to see really what this means, what equity means. And again, every institution is going to have their own definition of equity, but it should all be planted in this foundation of some similarities here. So Achieving the Dream believes that access to high quality education in an inclusive environment is the right of all individuals and imperative for the continued advancement of a strong democracy and workforce. Achieving the Dream also believes higher education institutions have an obligation to work toward better equity for their students. Equity then is grounded in the principles of fairness. In higher education, equity refers to ensuring that each student receives what they need to be successful through the intentional design of the college experience. So again, equity is grounded in fairness. What is going to be there to help every student succeed, whatever their success and goals are? We just need to make sure we've given them the fairness there to be able to do that. Now, an important aspect of achieving equity is dismantling barriers. So what are those barriers that may be in place?
So on this slide, you can see the percentage of adults aged 25 to 64 who have attained an associate's degree or higher by race and ethnicity, both in Ohio, which you can see in blue, and the United States, which you can see in red. We've highlighted Hispanics and African Americans to show the disparity, especially in Ohio. This chart shows unemployment rates pre and post COVID-19. So we're looking at February 2020 versus June 2020. And we're looking at that by race, ethnicity, and education. It really highlights the disparity for those with less than a high school diploma, but especially for Blacks who have the highest rates of unemployment across the board and also experience the highest jump in rates due to COVID-19. So you can see in some cases, the rates doubled or tripled from February 2020 to June 2020 for African Americans. And that's in the case of individuals with bachelor's degrees or higher.
Our Closing the Equity Gap subgroup identified two initial steps that are important to the process. The first is define equity and to create a statement of commitment to equity mindedness. The Achieving the Dream statement that Tiffany discussed earlier might serve as a framework, but colleges should consider their own community and student population when developing their definition of equity. Subpopulations might be historically underserved groups, such as racial and ethnic minorities and first-generation students. In addition to defining equity, goals and a timeline for achieving the goals should be established, as well as a system to track progress. It's not enough just to create a statement of equity, but goals must be established to make sure that progress is being made. The second point is that post-secondary institutions should review and amend policies and practices that perpetuate inequities in order to impact a broader community of learners. And this has become increasingly important in recent months, largely because of COVID-19 and inequities that have become more obvious during this time. We defined the steps in the student experience, including connection and recruitment, entry and enrollment, progress and persistence, completion and transition. Transition might be going into the workplace, or it could also be transferring to a baccalaureate institution. And it's important that equity mindedness be infused in every aspect of the adult learner experience. If it's not an individual might not make it to that next step?
We will end with this. As compared to whites, Blacks and Hispanics have lower level of educational attainment and literacy skills. And in order for us to close the equity gap, post-secondary institutions must dismantle barriers that impede student success. Now that takes us having those courageous conversations about what do we need to do as an institution. And as Phyllis said very early in the presentation, we've got to now remove some of those practices that are antiquated and don't allow us to really be able to see fully where are we not being equity minded, and what do we need to do to make sure our policies and practices are in line with what is most appropriate. Thirdly, we've got to have the availability of affordable childcare and computer access that are barriers faced by many racial and ethnic minorities. Affordable childcare, excuse me, is such a challenge for our adult learners. You know, there are a lot of centers out there, but most of them may not be affordable to them. Or as Phyllis said as well, those students, they can't come during the day to take classes. So we need childcare that's affordable and available later in the evening. And computer access, you know, we think that everyone has access to a computer. Well, they may have it, but do they have internet availability close to them? So again, we've got all of these barriers here that sometimes we take for granted that are really having a tremendous impact on our racial and ethnic minorities. And then finally, equity-mindedness needs to be infused throughout the student experience. Connection and recruitment, entry and enrollment, progress and persistence, completion, and transition.